Okay, so we are done actually for the first part. So let me show you the second part, and then we'll finish our discussion. Okay, so now we have been asked actually to show the visualizations for invoices. Okay, if I go back to the data source, now we choose actually this worksheet, the customer balance, customer location, sales office. We didn't choose actually the customer invoice, right? But we have been asked actually to do some analysis which comes from invoices. So what I'm going to do, don't touch this one. You did already a great job for the first analysis, so don't touch it. So what you are going to do is, don't also bring the invoices here and don't delete this one. Instead, come here, re-upload the Excel file again, okay? For the second analysis, for the invoice analysis, okay? For the allowances, again, you upload the same Excel file again, okay? And then for returns, again, you will upload the same Excel file again, okay? So let us upload it again, the same Excel file. Now this time, I'm going to choose the customer invoice, okay? So I'll come here. So as you can see here, I'll create a new one, a new sheet. So I've been asked actually to show aging of accounts receivable, right? So aging of accounts receivable, okay? Let us make it very simple one. Aging of receivables. Aging of receivables, right? So what I'm going to do is, I will use the invoice date, okay? And then I'm going to use actually the invoice amount, okay? So in this case, I need to actually show for the daily distributions, okay, of the aging of the receivables, okay? So after I do this, I'll come here, and then you can choose this one, okay? So it looks nice. And another one is actually for, if you want to know actually the number of invoices or the amount of invoices, you can bring this one, okay? So, but this one is optional. This one is a must. This one is optional, okay? You just count the number of the invoices, but this one is very critical, okay? So if you want to change the color of this graph, so just click here. And then, for example, if you want to make this one like this color, okay? And then this one to something like, let us see, I prefer this one, okay? So you can choose this one. So we are done actually for the aging of receivables, very simple one. But if you want to know actually the dominant months in terms of aging of receivables, you can also duplicate the aging of receivables analysis or visualization, duplicate. Okay, and then as I mentioned, this one is not really important, so remove it. And this time I'm going to use this one, the trim up. Okay, but this one I need to reduce 2 months. Okay, so these are actually the months that I'm interested in. I mean, not interested. So most of the invoices are actually from December, November, September, right? It makes sense. The reason is that, so this is the end of the year is actually December 31st. Okay, the auditor is actually auditing from January 1st to December 31st, right? So most of my invoice should be like in the last 3-4 months, right? So it should be dominated by December, November, and October, right? But if it is more than 6 months, then it should be a small amount and it makes sense, okay? So we have already created what is that? Yeah, we have already created this one. If you want to change the color, you can do that from here. Okay, so for example, I prefer this kind of stuff, okay? I prefer more of a green. So you can choose this one, and then you can screenshot, and then you can provide your answer in the Word file, okay? So the next and the last, but the most important one is how to visualize the invoice amounts, okay? So the distribution of invoice amounts, okay? Okay, so let us come here. So let us call this one distribution of distribution of invoice amounts, okay? Okay. So for this one, what you are going to do is we need to use a histogram to show actually the distribution. So let us create actually, basically this one, the beans. so that we can create a beautiful histogram graph. So create beans. And then let us make this one 2000, okay? Let us make this one 2000. I mean the size of the bean. That means the range 2000, 2000, 2000. Okay? And yeah, so let us make it okay. And then after this, we have already created, this is actually how to create the beans. And after this, let us show the distribution of the invoice amounts, okay? So how can you show it? Okay, so we'll show actually the beans as well as the count of the invoices, okay? So for example, if you want to show the distribution of the invoice amounts, you can bring it here, okay? The count of the invoices, okay? And you can bring the invoice amount here, okay? So what we are going to do is, let us do this one, okay? Okay, so after you do this, let us make this visualization beautiful, okay? So let us use this one, what you call a highlight table, okay? So as you can see here, we have already created this table, okay? The distribution of our invoice amounts, okay? So for example, invoices with between 0 to 2000 amounts, we have about 17 between 2000 and 4168, something like that. This is just to show the distribution of the invoice amounts, okay? So after this, we need to show basically the histogram, which actually provides a beautiful distribution of our invoice amounts, okay? So how can you do that? So we'll come here. Maybe let us duplicate this so that it will be very simple. It will make our life simpler. Let us duplicate, okay? Okay, so this time, let us bring this one, okay? I'll put it in the invoice amount here. And then let us bring this one if you like, or it is the same thing basically. You can bring the invoice amount here, okay? So after this, you need to change the measure to count, okay? If you want to show this beautiful distribution, okay? So after this, let us change this one. Okay. Oh. Okay. Okay. So basically we have created a very beautiful histogram distributions, okay, in order to visualize the distribution of the invoice amounts, okay? If you want to change the colors, you can just bring this one, the invoice amount, what is that? The invoice amount on color, okay? And then you can just change the color, okay? You can come here, you can edit it. You can edit the color, okay? So for example, if you want to use, for example, let us see. If you want to choose a blue, you can choose that one, but I prefer somewhat this one, okay? So you can use this one, okay? This histogram distributions, and then voila, we have already completed the first and the second files, which means the invoice and the customer locations. So you are going to do actually the same approach again and again for the allowances and for the returns, okay? That means this one's for the returns, and then for the, sorry, this one's for the allowances, okay? It's just the same procedure, basically, okay? I have already provided you the pictures, just follow the procedures, and then you need to replicate this kind of graphs. So after that, you need to ask your customer a question, okay? So that is actually all about how to create actually visualizations using Tableau software, okay? Frankly speaking, I already give you a general idea. I think there will not be any confusion because I already provided you what kind of visualizations, what kind of graphs you need to include, for example, like this one, right? And then I give you, for example, a sample answer, for example, for this one, for example, a sample answer, this one examples are the sample answers, okay? And then how to raise actually a good question for the client, for example, you can use this kind of questions, right? This kind of analysis are very, very important, okay? Actually, for me, in order to prepare this project, it took me time, okay? So for me, actually, it was simple to just ask you guys to prepare just a report, a normal report. I will give you a case study and then you write a report. But I can assure you this project will help you in the future, somewhere along the line. The reason is that one, you will develop analytical skill, okay? Because after you show the visualizations, you need to analyze it, okay? So for example, I'll give you an example later. And then first analytical skill, because based on the visualization, you need to make analysis, right? And another one is you are developing your technical skills. The reason is that I think for most of you, because I taught you like a couple of subjects, so for most of you, it will be your first time to use Tableau, right? So Tableau is actually very beautiful, okay? For example, if you show this kind of graphs, okay, they're very, actually, they're very beautiful, right? Which may not be available in Excel, okay? This kind of graphs, it may not be available actually in the Excel. Let me just go back. Okay, this kind of graphs may not be as beautiful as Tableau, and of course it is very powerful. Okay, if you dive deep into it. So obviously it will help you, it will help actually your analytical skills, your technical skills, this project. And obviously it will also help you to develop your CV. The reason is that, for example, if a student indicated, okay, under skill in his CV, if you put, for example, Excel, let us say Tableau, QuickBooks, okay, so on and so forth, Zero, for example, Zoho, something like that, and then the employer will be interested because if you use Tableau, he knows that, okay, you used it for analytical purposes, right? So it will be helpful for your job market as well. So just utilize this opportunity, okay? Just play with the data. You can come up with, by the way, with the different colors, okay? With the different approaches, okay? So just use your own technical skills to develop these graphs and these maps, okay? And then after that, the most important one is actually you need to analyze it. Okay, your analytical skill should be developed based on the visualization. Your technical skill will be developed when you draw basically those graphs and maps. And after that, you need to ask actually the customer a good question. Okay, so for example, let me just go back to my data set that I have already developed for this project. Okay, this is my data set. I have already completed from A to Z. Let me open it, okay? So for example, if I come to, for example, the allowance percentage. So from this visualization as an auditor, what do you understand, for example? Okay, so for example, from here, when you come to allowance analysis, allowance percentage, here you have to give me one question. You have to raise one very critical question to the customer. Okay, so under normal circumstances, we give an allowance percentage of like 10%, 20%, maybe 30%, right? But the allowance percentage cannot be more than the total sales, right? For example, in this case, we have about 110% allowance percentage. Allowance percentage cannot be more than 100%, right? Maximum, you can give him, for example, 90%, and then you will make 10% profit maybe. So the maximum you can give him actual an allowance of maybe 90, maybe 100, maybe. But this one, 120%, 120%, 110%, 140%. So that we have actually a couple of customers here. For example, here 1, 2, another one. So these are actually either they're related to fraud or error, okay? Under normal circumstance, we don't have this kind of allowance percentage. So visualization is very critical and important for an auditor because, for example, by doing so, you easily identify it, right? It helps you to analyze it and to have a discussion with your customer, okay, with your clients, basically, okay. So another important point is, for example, here, as you can see here, the return time. So after you sell your products, a customer most likely will return actually a product one time, right? He cannot return 2 times. But actually, we have actually a few customers who actually return the product 2 times. So for example, this guy, he actually returned it 2 times. It is a very weird visualization, right? It is a very weird scenario. I don't think a customer will return a product 2 times unless it is related to some fake sales. Okay, so it helps you to raise this kind of questions. So after you visualize, you will raise this kind of questions for the customer. Especially in order to raise the questions, I strongly suggest you to utilize these ones, okay? So for example, those customers with more than 400,000 invoice balances, they are large and they are very important. So if you find, for example, when you do, for example, invoice balances, so that means sales balances by customer, and then if you find, for example, a customer with a sales balance, okay, a sales on account balance with more than 400,000, then he's a very large customer. And then for the customer, you need to raise this question. You have to tell him, okay, this is very critical customer. And then are you going to collect from him? This kind of questions. And they have actually a return policy of, the company has a return policy of actually 90 days. Okay. So for example, if you go back to your analysis, return time, for example, as you can see here, for 90 days, most of the customer, like maybe 95, maybe 98% of the customers, their return is actually within 90 days. It makes sense. But those guys, we have a few customers who returned actually after 90 days. So it is against the company's policy. So you need to raise this kind of questions to the client when you come to, for example, this question, the client, where is that return analysis? Okay, for example, when you actually, this one, when you do this kind of analysis, so you have to raise this kind of question. So Tableau is a very powerful software, and the Tableau visualization will help you to improve your risk analysis skills basically in auditing. So I strongly suggest you to utilize this opportunity to develop your skills, because when you graduate, you are graduating classes. So when you graduate, obviously you'll do this kind of stuff practical. It's a very practical project. So I hope you'll benefit from here, and then you'll enjoy it, because you'll play with the data, the visualization, those beautiful visualizations, and then you'll do analysis. So I hope you'll benefit and you'll enjoy it. If you have any questions, you can ask me. So this is all about my explanation about your project. So feel free to reach me in person or by email. So I'll respond to your questions. So I'll see you, okay? I'll see you next week.